one of the things that's going to be happening is we're going to do switching back and forth. There'll be times where I will want to be demonstrating some hands-on stuff, and then there'll be times that we have a presentation that we're going to cycle through. So just bear with us with the technicality of switching back and forth, but it should go well. Really excited about the turnout here. I would never have guessed we'd have this many people interested in this, so it's great. And coincidentally, for everyone who's not out of the Sioux Falls area, we're in a blizzard warning right now. It's no travel advised. It's getting pretty nasty out here. This was a perfect example of technology, the benefits of it. So this is great that we had this all set up. So with that, let's maybe switch the screen over. And while she's doing that, so this is a class on predator calling, and we're going to primarily talk about coyote. In South Dakota, coyote calling is probably the big one that a lot of people do. But we will touch base on fox, bobcat, and then we'll go into a little more depth on raccoon. And I'm kind of excited about the raccoon calling because it's one of those unknown, lesser known species that maybe deserves some recognition as a game animal. They respond to a call well, and so we'll get into that a little later, but just kind of giving you guys a heads up of what's coming. So there's a few pictures of some of our coworkers here, but we'll just get right into it. So starting off is why should we go out and do this? I can't answer that question. That's something everyone's going to have to answer for themselves. I can answer it for myself, and for me, I'm doing it as a job. In that center picture and in that lower right picture, that's the result of what a coyote can do to livestock. I know it's a little gory, but that's reality. They are an animal that cause a lot of damage. So I am doing it as a service for the producer. They pay a tax, and we come out and we help them minimize their problem. For most of you guys in the crowd, it's going to be some of these other things. Big one is the challenge. Calling a coyote in, having it respond the way you're planning, and getting it to follow through, making that clean, ethical shot, and harvesting that fur, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's a high five moment. That's a selfie picture, send to your friends. I mean, that's good stuff. You may be also looking at it from population control. Coyotes, raccoon, fox, if you're managing some land for pheasants primarily, or white-tailed deer, mule deer, these are some considerations you may want to be thinking about. The nest predation and fawns, and the adult pheasants in addition to the nest predation. It's a real thing. Right now, we're still in the prime fur season. Fur value, that's an obvious one. You can sell the fur when they're good. Another one, this is probably one of the things that got me going into it, was the deer seasons were done. The pheasant seasons were done. It was, ice fishing, or I could go predator calling. So I really like that aspect of it. And inexpensive, that second to the last one, that should be in quotes. It can be as inexpensive as your deer rifle, or your shotgun, or whatever you have, and the call. I think everybody's getting the call, or a lot of people are getting a call, depending on what we have for turnout. to be determined. Inexpensive in that regard. Go out and that's all you need. You can make it happen with just that. And when I say air quotes or put quotes around it, you can start getting expensive when you start talking electronic collars, multiple different calibers of firearms, multiple different mouth calls, camouflage. Some people, are even outfitting their vehicles and gas and mileage and hotels. you can make it whatever you want it to be. So, you know, don't be afraid of the cost. You can make it as little or as much as you want. And then the last thing is the ease. You know, and ease can be a couple things. Ease of access, that is a big one for me. It's really getting a little more difficult to get permission to harvest a pheasant or a deer on private property. Not impossible, but harder. But you go knock on that door and ask if you could take a few raccoons out of their tree belt. They're going to probably say yes. And you do that enough times with respect, you build up those relationships. Sometimes that can lead to some other hunting opportunities. So just keep that in mind. Moving into some of that equipment we were just talking about, you know, these are all the basic things. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but you know, you guys can read it too. I hope you guys can see that, but I'll also cover it. But footwear, you got to keep those feet warm in the winter. You got to be comfortable if you're putting on a lot of miles. Your upper and lower body clothing, camouflage in the daytime, it's borderline a must, but it's not. It does help. So, you know, you're going to be looking at something durable, something warm, something comfortable. Face mask is important. You know, now I'm primarily talking coyotes, but face mask is it's going to be front and center for that coyote, and they are the wariest animal that we deal with. Gloves. I can't remember the movie, but the guy had never know where to put your hands. Well, a coyote, this is what they're going to see. See if I can just demonstrate a little bit. If you're all crouched down and stuff, your hands are up and moving around rifle. So I like some kind of a glove just to break up my hand outline a little bit. Now a seat cushion, that's something a lot of people don't think about, but I last about 10 minutes sitting on my butt in frozen ground before it starts getting cold, and then my legs start going numb. That circulation starts getting cut off. And when that happens, I start to fidget, and a coyote will pick up movement faster than anything else. So if you can get yourself comfortable, that seat cushion will get those animals in closer, less chance of spooking, and it's a little more comfortable for you. So don't forget that. Weapon camo. This one's not camoed up. Pretty easy to do. There are a lot of commercial products out there, ranging anywhere from, I got this, you know, just like tape. You know, there's also guys will spray paint. That's a little more permanent, but there's all kinds of non-marring, non-damaging options for you. This is actually just, it's called Coban or horse tape, or, you know, just you just self-stick onto each other. I use this a lot for just kind of a quick camo.
And Greg, too, I would say, you know, as calling has gotten more popular, used to be 20 years ago, you could spend 10, 15 minutes on a calling stand and you could get up and leave and be pretty confident. But anymore, the more comfortable you can stay, the longer you can stay on that stand, especially when it's cold. And a lot of times now with more calling pressure, you know, it's not uncommon for them coyotes to not come in until 35, 40 minutes. So the more comfortable you are, the more warm you are, especially in cold weather, the better off your success will be as well.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that tends to happen with people is, you know, especially those cold, crisp mornings when there's no wind, that coyote is hearing some of those vocalizations, some of those calls from a long ways away, and it may take them a while to get to you. So yeah, great point, Randy. I lost the remote, so there you go. All right. So getting back to the equipment, Dad always said before he went hunting, do you have his quick checklist, gun, shells, license. So first one, a weapon. We need something. So rifle or shotgun, both work. We could spend this whole time talking about caliber selection and bullet construction and shotgun versus centerfire versus rimfire, where they apply, when they don't apply. I don't know where you're hunting. I will tailor what I'm going to take out in the field to where I'm going. So in this picture, you can see that's a pretty wide open setup. So I'm definitely thinking rifle in this. And it could be more of a long range rifle. I have a heavy barrel 22-250 that I prefer for the long range stuff. But this AR-15 that I have right behind me, it's the same one in the picture. I really like that because of, it's usually the one I have with me. The suppressor, we can talk about that a little bit. If you have the luxury of owning one, they will help with some follow-up, maybe a second coyote. They are a really nice option if you have that, if you have one. Optics, we could go on and on about them too, but you're gonna have to pick what works for you. Longer range, more zoom, great. Close range, brush, lesser zoom is probably the better way to go. When you're looking at that, you can also look at what your partner's doing. You know, predator hunting can be a solo sport, but it can also be a group sport. I really enjoy going out with one other person. You can kind of cover ground differently. So you may pair up a short range caliber and a long range caliber, or a shotgun with a rifle. And I believe Randy's going to get into a lot more of that later on in the presentation. So I just want to just kind of touch on that.
Yep, Greg, we got a question in the chat.
Sure.
You said you weren't going to talk much about it, but what calibers are legal and what quickly do you recommend?
Legal, I don't, for daytime predator hunting in South Dakota, everything is legal. We do not have any caliber restrictions. What I recommend, bottom, it's so hard to say. What's your personal limitations? Are you a 300-yard shot person? Are you a 600-yard shot person? Or are you a 100-yard shot person? This AR-15 is in 223. That does a great job, but I'm limited. I keep my shots inside that 250-yard range. Not to say that it's not capable. I just prefer in a little closer. I have a higher percentage of kill, a little more ethical. I'm still retaining a little more energy. 22-250 though is the go-to coyote gun, in my opinion. It's really hard to beat that. But some of the deer calibers, you can figure them out how to work, to make it work. You know, you got to consider fur damage. If you're hunting in a when the fur's prime, you don't want to be destroying the fur. And I'll go into the caliber and stuff for the raccoons and stuff. It's always tough because we were separating out. Coyote versus raccoon is vastly different. So I'll cover the caliber and the weapon a little bit more in the raccoon section. But as far as coyotes go, 223 to all the way up to 25-06, even 6.5 Creedmoor, 243, they're all very capable. If you're looking to save the fur, be a little more fur friendly, 22-250, 223, you can even go smaller in like that 17 Hornet. I do not recommend the rimfires. Just too many wounded animals. If you're going to go with like a 17 HMR, you better be really close and really good with your shots, because there's too many that get shot and they run off. Perfectly capable of killing, but it's, in my opinion, it's not as ethical of a round to use. 22 long rifle, no. There's also like the 22 Magnum, 22 Winchester Mag. So going on, calls. We'll just briefly skip over these a little bit because we're going to go in depth more. Got a whole handful of them. The hand calls, open read, close read, diaphragm, squeakers, electronic calls. We'll get into those a little bit more. Decoys, I got one of those back here, whether it's just a flickering rabbit or a flickering bird or something to grab the animal's attention. Scent killer, I mean, you're never gonna outsmart a coyote's nose. Just keep that in mind. And we'll go over that a little bit more. Radios, rangefinder, GPS, pretty standard. Maps, both your phone, you can get products such as like Onyx maps or the Plat books, Game and Fish, we have a directory, and then something to carry all your junk with. When to call. Let's see. One of the things about hunting is knowing your equipment, knowing your animal, knowing your locations. So time of year, fall is the main time people think. Fall and winter are the main two times people are going out. There's other times you can go out for other reasons, but we're kind of looking at the hunting aspect versus the animal damage control. So fall, they're more sellable, furs in prime when there's a market. Winter, still some in prime, less so, but a little more educated. But, you know, kind of, you might have more time in the winter, you know, deer seasons, and like we talked earlier. Time of day, sunrise, good movement, getting out right at its first light. You know, you might catch a coyote still poking around. They're still active. You can call a coyote any time of the day or any time of night. So keep that in mind. Midday is probably the lowest percentage calling time, still doable. Sunset, you're dealing with a hungry animal. They've been sleeping all day. They're getting ready, so be thinking about that. But the problem with sunset is sometimes you'll get them coming in and you're fighting the sun. The sun might be setting and they're working in, so you may lose an animal in those regards. Nighttime, there's in South Dakota now we can use night hunting optics, night vision, thermal. Another good option out there. It's just the equipment's really expensive. Locations, we have plenty of locations, and I apologize for the people who are not in South Dakota, but you know, we're gearing this towards us. They're going to be similar wherever you're at, but we have our state-owned game production areas, federal-owned waterfowl production areas, our CREP ground, which is leased hunting ground for in our walk-in areas. All those are fair game for predator hunting. But I would say, you know, you're missing out if you're not knocking on some doors, talking to some people, making those connections with the landowners and getting permission there. You got to keep in mind, a coyote has been pushed off of these hunting grounds by pheasant hunters and deer hunters all fall long. The densities are going to be higher on private ground. So hunting setup, our hunting 101. You know, you got to get there. So you got to figure out what to do with your vehicle. Be thinking about that before you get there. Have a plan in place. Park your vehicle behind some trees, behind some hay bales. If that's not an option, in a low spot in the road, and then walk. I like to stop a mile or 2 or 3 beforehand and get everything ready. So when I park, I shut the car off, I open the door, I slip out, I close the door, not slam the door, and I'm off doing what I need to be doing. No conversations, no discussion on how we're going to do this, just have a plan, minimal intrusion in the environment. Keep the noise minimum. Wind, a coyote has an amazing nose. Do not underestimate it. I was out, I think 2 nights ago, and I was working on a coyote, and it was so obvious when he winded me. It turned into a less than ideal setup, and he was coming into a howl, and it was crossing across a bean stubble field, 600-700 yards downwind, and you could just plain as day see when he hit the scent cone. So you always picture whatever way if wind's hitting me in the face, I have a scent cone dispersing behind me. Well, this particular time, my scent cone was going right towards its path. As soon as he hit that, he put on the brakes. He sat there for about 30 seconds, turned around, and he was gone. never underestimate the power of a coyote's nose. The sun, if you can pick it, if you have the choice in your face or in your back, always pick your back. You know, you don't want to be staring in the sun, make the coyote stare into the sun. Keep your sky, you know, keep out of the skyline if you can help it. You know, look in this picture, you see those two guys, they're up on the skyline. If you bring them off the, if you're sitting there, you wouldn't want to be sitting there. You come, even if you're just in that grass, come on down a little bit. And then the distance, if you run an electronic collar, anywhere from 10 yards to 100 yards, depending on location. And then we're throwing a bunch out here, and so bear with me. If you got a partner, that's a great time to cover that downwind. Cover two different areas. If you're just sitting side by side, you can whisper to each other. That's great, and there's sometimes advantages there. But if you can put someone, if you're on a hilltop, and one person covers one valley and the other one's behind, then you can kind of work out some codes. One of my former coworkers and I, when we'd go out, if one of us saw something, we'd just kind of do a little lip squeak, and just a silent one, but that was our code. Hey, I see a coyote, and that's just get ready. Safety, that goes without saying. We got high power firearms. Just know your target, know what's in the background. Use the brush, rocks, trees, fence, whatever it helps to break up your outline. Little movement is possible. That's the hard one. I talked about that already. Just can't stress it enough. Movement will give you away. I'll pick still over camouflage any day. If I had to pick street clothes and was able to stay perfectly still, I'll take that over the best camouflage in the world and be fidgety. Let's see. Randy touched on this time. I have a 15-minute minimum on here. Don't be afraid to sit out there for 45 minutes. Some of these coyotes are cautious. They've been worked by a lot of different hunters, farmers, people driving around. Every coyote someone sees, they usually stop the vehicle and look. So they're going to take a cautious approach. They may be doing a big circle downwind to use that nose to see if it's safe. So don't be afraid to sit it out. And also, when you're done calling, just sometimes that's when they'll come in. So keep the binoculars rolling when you're done calling. Then once your stand is done, one of the things, if you're going to come back there, you may want to just slip out there as quietly as possible. Slip in, slip out, because there may have been one coming in, you didn't see it, and if you just slip out, you didn't educate. If you stand up and then you start talking, go pick up your collar, eat a snack, whatever, that coyote might have been just crossing over that hilltop, didn't see, or you didn't see it, but you just educated that one. The next time you come out there, or the next hunter, is going to have a harder time. Go to the next slide.
Okay, so we're going to go into now some locations to call. And this one here is set up for bobcats. And I don't know how many in the group here have actually have cats around in their areas that are legal, but they are legal here in South Dakota. Cats love cover. They primarily eat rabbits, turkeys, things of that nature. So they're going to be down along these drainages. This is a river drainage. In the wintertime when it's frozen, you'll find a lot of bobcat tracks on there. They use it as a travel way. So if I was going to look at this on a map, and these maps have really helped a lot without having to drive and do a lot of on the ground scouting. Still a good idea to get out there and get on the ground, but these maps do help speed things up. Again, you can always want to use the wind. So we would want our wind coming from, say, the south, if this is the north, up this way. But my locations to cover this area for calling, one would be on this knob. You're basically going to be able to cover all this cover in here. And again, critters are kind of lazy. They're going to take the path of least resistance. And where that river kind of makes that wide bend, they're going to try that straight line. So that hill is going to give you a lot of good vision to see from on the right-hand screen one there. And then on the left-hand side where the other red arrow is, that's another nice high point to call down into that cover. And all these critters, whether they be bobcats or coyotes, they love to work the shadows. And during daytime, whether it's in the morning or afternoon, midday, there's always going to be shadows. And that's a particular area you want to pay attention to because they're used to sneaking on prey. So they know the best way to get in there. And a lot of times it'll be in a shadowy spot. So if you get on a sunny day where it's casting a shadow, that's probably the direction they're going to take. One thing with bobcats, they're very slow and meticulous. They're not like some aggressive coyotes. Plan on staying there 45 minutes to an hour to call cats. And they're going to be moving slow and they're going to hang to that cover. So I guess that's my best pointers on that location there for bobcat. This is another nice one. You can see this one's labeled the White River. It's a river system we have out west. And again, you got all this nice thick cover down here, turkeys, rabbits. So again, where that red arrow is, that's a good location there. Again, that would probably be north. So you're going to hunt this with a south wind or a straight west wind. But calling down into all that, you can see that nice little walkway coming right up in there. That would be the direction that those cats would want to come up into that area. So that would give you a real good vantage point from that spot there to call cats.
All right, now we're switching over to more of the raccoon calling. And this was something we added in a couple of years ago, and I'm really excited about it because it's a hoot. If you've never done it, you need to do it because a raccoon really works a call well. And, you know, you can go get a few friends together. It's not a hard animal to call in. And there's the density of raccoons per coyote it's crazy how many more raccoons there are. So don't overlook this. So this would be if I saw something like this, that's raccoon habitat. Look at all those old buildings, old trees, those big old den trees. There's a shelter belt in the background. If you go out there in that snow cover, you're going to find raccoon tracks everywhere. So do a little scouting, find those raccoon tracks, follow them to the tree or the building they're going to. You're going to have a pretty good idea where the raccoons are at. Fox are also in some of this stuff. So this picture here, I was out with a friend on this one. So obvious den tree. Look at that hole. That's an old knot. That's just a picture I dug out with that raccoon. I found that on the internet, but I wanted to put it up there. So you see something like that. That's a good spot, good place to start. Now this angle's not the best angle to work this because you'll get a raccoon popping out. This is more typically of what we want to look at. So I just blew up the picture on the left with the arrow on it. That's the same tree that we're looking at. You can see where I'm sitting. I backed off on this one. I'm sitting out there. I have a rimfire. I think I'm hunting that day with a 22 Magnum. And on the back side of this tree is that hole like we were looking at. You want to set up your caller. You want to get that raccoon interested in you, and you want them to wrap around that tree. Because if you just get them to poke their head out and you shoot them, they just fall down in the tree. We don't want that. We want to be able to harvest that raccoon. Usually there's some pretty decent fur value there. And if there's 3 in that tree, you want to be able to get the other ones too. So, you know, keep that in mind when you're setting up, just to keep that opening on the backside, because you got to get them to come out of that tree.
Okay. And one thing I would say too is like that's a great deal there, Greg. You know, if you see a bunch of coon feces at the base of the tree, if you see coon hair wedged in the bark, you know them coons are in there for sure.
They're not a hard animal to find. They give themselves away through, you know, the tracks, the latrine sites. You can even look on old buildings. You can see the claw marks going up. You can tell exactly which way they're going to come from. Trees, when you see, it's crazy when you look at these big old cottonwoods that'll have a whole pile of bark at the bottom, and you'll just see the barks just wore off from how many times they've gone up and down that tree. But then also don't overlook holes, brush piles, and old buildings. And when you're looking at old buildings, this particular one, that arrow on the left, we had one come out of that hole, and then we also had one come out of that joint on the right, that soffit. So be thinking high. They tend to be higher up, but they could be coming through the door too. But you get them poking out on the rooftops. I mean, you find these houses everywhere. Most people could care less whether or not you're hunting on them. And I took the picture right from where I was sitting. I just backed up against an old tree, I believe this one was, or it might have been a piece of machinery. Set the caller out, and away we went.
Hey, Greg, got a couple questions here.
Sure.
Are raccoons active this time of year?
Great question. Yes and no. So we got a blizzard, we got a cold front, and we got cold temperatures. They're going to hole up in the tree and not move. We just, a couple days ago, in the last couple days ago, we were in the 40s. A good rule of thumb is when you walk outside and that air has that bite to it, and it's just that just cuts through your clothes and it's cold, don't bother. When you step out and like, man, that sun feels pretty nice out, and you're moving around and yeah, it doesn't feel too bad. You're like, winter's like this, I can handle it. That's when to call. You can take them, they'll come out in the middle of winter that way, because they need to come out every now and then.
And then we got a question. Is there a limit for how many raccoons you can harvest?
No. In fact, we're encouraging you to harvest a lot, as many as you can.
And I would say too, me and a coworker, we went out a couple nights ago to try to call in some coyotes, and it was like in the 30s, and we saw 5 raccoons sitting in the crotches of 2 big cottonwood trees. So.
Yeah, so the bitter cold, that's when they're denned up, and they're going to stay that way. But if you got a long stretch of cold weather, and as soon as that day that it breaks, that is the day to go out when it's winter. Because they're going to come out and go find their latrine site. They're going to poke around a little bit, see if they can find some food. They're going to be active. So yeah, good question. As far as sounds go, they're not too picky. That's the other thing about a raccoon, is they're not a fussy animal for the calls. There's kind of your basics. There's a raccoon fight sound. In fact, let me pull some of them up here while I'm talking. There's raccoon fight. There's a pup in distress. Then you could do some of the other distressed animal sounds, like same you'd use for coyote, like a woodpecker in distress and a rabbit in distress. So I should have.
Meaning they want to come where the bite is?
Yeah, you're dealing with, and this kind of goes with all animals. You're dealing with food, territory, or love. You're playing on those basic needs of those animals. So if they're looking, and maybe a little curiosity. But so when you're doing an adult in distress, so hopefully everyone can hear that okay. So that's a distress. Here's a baby sound. Baby's in distress. And here, raccoon fight. I mean, these things sound mean as all get out. I don't know why I smile every time I hear that one playing, but it's pretty neat that you can get them coming to those sounds. It's hard, even after you've done a bunch, it's just hard to believe like that's going to really get them coming up, but it works. And if you've been out at night and you've heard raccoons fighting in the distance, it happens a lot. It's really loud, but it gets their interest. It'll get them coming out and out of that tree and coming out and where you can get a shot at them, and pretty neat. And the distress sounds, we'll go over those a little bit more in the coyote stuff.
We had some people who have their dogs watching too, and they did not like that.
Well, keep the volume up. We got more for the dogs. Randy, did you have anything to add on those raccoon sounds?
Yeah, I mean, them are the go-to ones. That's the fun of the raccoon calling. They're not like a coyote. If they're going to come, it's going to be usually quick. And, and if you're in an area where you don't have like the old abandoned houses or trees, old haystack piles too, that'll hold a lot of raccoons. Like out west when I was out by Faith, we had a lot of them that just got into the old haystack piles and lived in there. And you could call them out of there. And actually the landowners wanted you to because of all the defecation and urination on their hay bales, and the cows wouldn't touch that stuff. So kind of helps out the farmers that way too, the ranchers.
Got a couple more questions here. Do I need a special license to hunt raccoons? What license do I need?
Raccoons don't have a lot of restrictions in South Dakota. Mostly you just need a license. Predator, varmint. If you have a deer license, I believe that counts. Small game license, pretty much you need a license is what it boils down to. But the cheapest one is the predator varmint, and I'd have to look. I think it's like $5-6 for the year.
And then when calling,
and on your own land, I believe there's some exemptions for that.
Perfect. And then when calling raccoons, how long should I call, and when do I know how to stop? How should I know my cadence?
So what you really don't need to stop calling. You can just go from one sound right into the other. And Randy had mentioned a little bit that you be ready, because it's fast and furious at times. I mean, if you're not ready when you hit that, raccoons have been known to tackle decoys next to callers. I'll run this decoy, this flickering, it's just a Fox Pro one. They've been known to, I've never had it happen, but I've seen videos of it. They'll come in so hard that they'll tackle it. And so be ready. If nothing happens in 15 minutes, I move on. It's not something I'm going to put 45 minutes into. It's either going to happen or not on raccoons. Good question. All right. Yeah. So here's a basic setup. One of the stand setup. Don't overlook camouflage. You don't need it, but if you have it, use it. It's not going to hurt anything, because you might get we call them peekers, where a raccoon might be peeking around a tree and not fully committing. So if you're sitting still, camouflage with the same thing, basics I talked about earlier with the silhouette. Scent is not as important with raccoon, but know your range with where you're effective with the firearm you're using. With a rimfire, like I said, I like a 22 Magnum myself, but 30 to 50 yards is perfect for me. That way I'm not, you get too close and you're swinging so fast when they start coming in hard. So 30, 40, 50 yards away is great distance. Same thing I talked about before with concealment, but I wish I had, I'm not big on the camera and video, and I really would like to get some videos of these guys coming in hard. There's a ton of them on YouTube, but I don't have any myself. So, but it can be really exciting. The rimfires are the popular one for the raccoon. You can use a centerfire, but it's pretty violent. It's not very fur friendly. You can also use a shotgun, and that is a good method, but it's a good excuse to bring the rimfires out, and keeps the noise at minimum. You keep the range that the bullet's flying if you miss, for the safety factor. And plus it's just, frankly, it's just fun. So, you can see that on the screen. 22 long rifle, not ideal, but works. 22 Magnum is great. That 17 HMR is still very good. There's a 17 WSM came out a few years ago. That does a good job too. And I guess getting back to that picture, in South Dakota, we've had the last couple of years, a big push on nest predators. And a raccoon, is a big nest predator. And that's why, this is something, if you're managing some land, in addition to a trapping, that you can do some hunting, because they do take a lot of pheasant nests, duck nests. And with the South Dakota economy, pheasant hunting is pretty important. And so if you're out there, just kind of keep that in mind, that is one of the reasons why to pick the raccoon to go after. All right, back to you, Randy.
Okay, so locations to call coyotes. So this one here is just kind of a basic deal. You're looking over, there could be a creek drainage down in those trees. That's kind of an area where these coyotes are going to like to lay up during the daytime, especially on these sunny days. They could even be sitting on top of the hay bale sunning themselves. So it's always good, like if you're going to come in and call this, give it a good once over with your binoculars, and make sure that you don't see any coyotes around. That happens at times, and if they see you, the odds of calling them in are pretty slim. But this is just kind of just a basic photo here, so we can go, I guess, on to the next one into some more detail. Okay, this is a good one here. So you got a stock pond here. We got drainages going up through there. We got trees, good place for them to be laying up again, or even hunting. Come in here, this would be just a typical good place. You got cattle trails coming down in along there. Again, the wind is the main thing. You got to always have that wind in your advantage. If you call this with the wind at your back blowing into that cover right there, your odds of getting them coyotes are pretty slim. So you always want that wind in your face, or a good crosswind that's taking your scent away from the direction where you think those coyotes are going to be laying up. Okay, this is a great one. You can see the guy actually here with the rifle. What I highlighted here are the 3 locations where I would be expecting to be looking for those coyotes to approach this stand. And again, you wouldn't use a lot of head movement. It's more just using your eyes. But again, they love to come in on the shadows, like down the middle of the draw, or they will come in on the high spots if it's a cloudy day like this. And they'll use that to sneak on in. They'll use them little cedar trees there. And it's amazing. You'll call, you might be there 15 minutes and not see nothing, and then all of a sudden you look up in that knoll and there he is. It's just that quick. You generally won't hear a coyote when they come in. They're very quiet. But so yeah, I would just, this guy's sitting there perfect, and I'd just be scanning with my eyes and be expecting that your shot is going to be at one of those three locations, as odds are where they're going to come to you. Again, another great thing here, you got all the cover in the background. You got cedar trees. On the left-hand side of that photo, you got a deer trail there. They run them all the time. That's going to be a great place. Again, down the middle of the draw. If there's a shadow there, say this was later in the day and the sun was going down, they're going to love to come up that middle because they're in the shade. And it is amazing, even with 2 people, when they're in the shadows, how one person can see it perfectly and your partner doesn't even see the coyote come in, and they could be 80 yards away. And then on the far right-hand side, again, the cedar trees, they're going to use that to come in as well to sneak into that set. But that's a good location there. You're elevated. You can see everything. I wouldn't sit down in the bottom of that because while the wind could be right for you, but if you're down low like that and you don't have a good vantage point, by the time you actually see them coyotes, they're going to be right on top of you. So yeah, always have that elevation so you can see. This is really good. You're going to be able to sneak in there behind the cedars. Even if there was a coyote down in there 300-400 yards laying sunning himself, by you using that cover to sneak in for that setup, the odds of being detected are much lower.
Randy, if I'm using an electronic call in this situation, where's the best place to put it in relation to me?
That's a good question. So it's all going to be depending on the wind. Coyotes, majority of them, are going to come in and they're going to circle downwind in that last 200 to 250 yards generally. So let's say the wind was blowing from the cattle trail over to the right-hand side of the photo there. I'm going to want to put that caller up along that cattle trail knowing full well that they're going to come down in the middle or to my right because that's the way the wind's blowing, and vice versa the other way. And it's kind of neat that after you've used an electronic collar for a while and you know the terrain and the wind, how you can set that up and you can really bring them coyotes right into your lap. That's a great question. So yeah, always remember the majority, some are just going to come barreling in straight at the sound, but a lot of them anymore, especially because a lot of calling has been taking place, they're going to do that downwind circle. And by where you position that collar and use that wind, that can make a big difference as what your success rate is. Again, another good location here, CRP grass, cattail sloughs, them type of things with that cover out there that you can see past the snow line there. Them are great day locations for coyotes to lay up in, also to go hunting. The pheasants are going to be down in there in the tough winter. They know the food sources are there. There's rodents still active down in there. So this would be a good location to call as well. Now, one thing is with this, if you were going to set up here, getting them to cross that open ice would be sometimes rather difficult to do. But if you could get them out to the edge of that and say that you range that, or you know it's 275 yards, if you're a comfortable shot at that, you know, just bringing them to that edge of that cover would work really good.
Randy, what does CRP mean?
Conservation Reserve Program grasses. It's a set-aside program. We do it with state. We call it CREP. The main thing is always been the federal. It's usually a 10-year program to have some land set idle where you don't row crop farm it and you let it go back to native grasses. It makes really good cover for wildlife, deer, pheasants, and it also it does help the coyote population because it just makes really good cover for everything. Okay, so on to this one. Again, we got that wide and snaky drainage going down through here. So again, if my wind was out of the south, say the south is the lowest portion on this map here, I would come up here and sit up on this high knoll on the top red arrow. That will give you a good vantage point of that whole country on that side of this drainage system here. The little side draws, as I call them, they'll use them a lot. The main drainage, and then you always have these side draws in this kind of terrain. Them coyotes love to use them side draws. They use them to hunt and also to travel, but it's just a natural corridor when you're calling. And then, you know, if the wind was the other way, I would set up off of that little piece of cover down there by that pinch point along the river on the lower portion of that on the slide. And them coyotes they're gonna pinch in between there. If they're coming off from say the northwest up to your left, in that cover and coming down, or if they're in the cover right down by the river or running the river or bedded along a frozen river, that little pinch point there would be an ideal place to set up. Again, wind is everything. You never want to go out and call your coyote areas if the wind isn't right. And sometimes that'll dictate whether it's a morning stand or an afternoon stand with the sun as well. But always try to have everything in your advantage. Sun at your back and the wind in your face. Basically what you want, where the coyotes are.
Speaking of wind, do I put any scent blocker on my collar or mojo critter?
No, you know, I'm not a big proponent of any of the scent blockers because, as Greg mentioned, their nose is so amazing. The main thing, and that's why we're setting up to have that wind to our advantage. That is the biggest thing. If they can't smell you, and you got that set up right, by the time they would get close enough to smell you, with the wind blowing into your face, you should have that coyote shot and dead on the ground anyhow. So if you feel you want to use it, you can, but I just never felt the need to use any of that type of scent killer or scent blocker or anything like that when I call coyotes.
And then generally when I go out, do I want to be looking for higher ground or lower ground?
Well, most of the time
Hang on 1 second, Randy. I want to just hop in there once. One of my favorite things to say is on that, similar to that question, is, you know, you can put scent blocker on there to cover up your scent, and you could maybe put coyote urine or some kind of a masking scent, maybe some skunk essence to cover up the scent that's out there. And then there's your scent, and I'm pretty sure what that coyote smells coming in is going to go, huh, there's a person wearing scent blocker with cover-up scent right over there. I really believe that's how good a coyote's nose is.
Yep. Yep. And that's a good question too, the high-low thing. It all depends. Whatever's going to give me the best vantage point and be able to see the farthest out. I would say generally most of the time that's going to be on the higher point. But if that's going to skyline me and me being up high and there's really nothing there that I can hide myself with, and if I know it's a daytime bedding area for them coyotes, then I'll take the lower route and sneak in there and just be a little bit more attentive with my eyes, or bring somebody else in, have 2 sets of eyes and 2 guns.
You know, I got a little story. I was out, I had a producer that lost a calf, and right next to Sioux Falls, heavily populated spot. And I had very few shooting lanes, very few spots to trap them because of all the potential dog problems, human interaction problems. It turned into a very difficult one to work. But I had one spot right where the cattle were coming in, and it was a low spot. I could hide up alongside his fence, so I had good concealment. Problem was I could only see about 80, 90 yards, but I could get that. So I had no idea what was coming, but when it came there, I had high hills all the way around me. So I had a good backstop for that bullet stop. So in this situation, if I was up higher, it would have hurt me. I would have more chances for that coyote to see me. I was down low. That coyote knows exactly where that sound's coming from. And I called in 3 different ones to that spot. Pulling them down the hill, get them down in the low. I had a clear shooting lane. My bullets were all going into the dirt. So your terrain is definitely going to play into what you got to work with. We don't all have these ideal giant rolling prairie breaks, these ideal spots. Sometimes you got to just go with what you got. And if you're not a good shot, you may want to be in there closer. Or if you're not a long range equipped with your firearms, not a long range, you may want to be in there closer and bring them in. But it is fun when you can see them come and get ready. So it's always a toss up on, it's a judgment call every place you go.
All right, we'll do one more question now, and then I'll hold the rest till the end here.
Okay.
What time of day would be best for me to coyote hunt? Morning, night, afternoon? What should I be looking for?
Really, whenever you can, I would say, when you can get out. But other things, again, with the especially if you'd be hunting like public areas, or even on some private ground where they're pretty generous with how many people they allow to be in there. Kind of find out maybe when other people are hunting and try a different time of the day. If I know an area that gets a lot of, there's lots of coyotes, but it gets pressure in the morning, I may try to call that spot at night from a totally different direction where then 90% of the people are coming in there. But really, you can call coyotes in all times of the day. I've even done it in the summer months in the middle of the day when it's 90 degrees. You just like Greg said, you're going to prey on they're hungry, or they're thinking about mating, or they're thinking about defending their territory. And, just take advantage of one of those 3 things. And, but yeah, calling, just whenever you can get out there and call. Now, your best times, of course, are going to be early morning, first hour and a half of the sun coming up, and then the last hour and a half at the end of the day. But really, anytime you can be out, I would be out.
I got something else I'll add to it. This is a perspective of someone who works next to the largest city in South Dakota. One other consideration a lot of people don't think about is, when's everybody else active? The coyotes know come about 7 o'clock, all the vehicles start up. Coyotes don't like vehicles. So if I'm around Sioux Falls or any other place there's a lot of people, I want to be up and done before all the commuter traffic, all the kids are going to school, all the buses, the people going to work, people start going and doing field work. If I can get in there before that, it's always better. The same thing in the evening. When I say rush hour traffic at night, it's not like bumper to bumper traffic, but one car within a mile of that coyote is going to put them on high alert. They hear that car coming down the highway, they're probably going to pause. And that's something to be thinking about when you're calling is if you're going to start calling and there's a car coming, just wait a few minutes. Give it 30 seconds. Let that car pass. Let it get quiet again. Because those coyotes are scared of cars because there's a lot of cars have shot at them in the past. So keep that in mind. People activity is another thing to be considering.
All right, we'll hold the rest of the questions till the end here.
Okay, so again, on this photo, we're looking at, you know, again, another drainage, nice big coverage area there. On the south portion of this photo, if you had a north wind, if north was at the top of the photo, the little tree line about halfway, right where that cursor was back. Yep, right in there, I would sit. That'd be a good thing to call into all that cover. And then, you know, that would be the way I'd tack that. Or otherwise, you could come up on the upper portion of the photo, right on the left where it makes that bend. Yep, right in there. That would be another place, if depending on when to sit and call as well. And if you're from an area, like I said, I don't know where everybody's from, but I've lived in Iowa and Missouri too and called in coyotes there. If you're in more heavy timbered areas, deer trails. They love deer trails in the heavy timbered areas. And I've called in a lot of coyotes and placed my electronic caller along them using the wind, and I've had shots at 20 yards time and time again. You know, again, coyotes are like us. They're going to use the path of least resistance the majority of the time. And that's just an easy thing to think about when you're out there trying to decide where you're going to do that from. Think about what's going to be the easiest route for you to go through or for them to come. So on that, we can go to the next. So on this one, again, we got the big body of water down there. And if we had a south wind, we got all them figure drainages that could be holding coyotes. And we, you know, so that top red arrow is where I would sit with the south wind, and you're going to call out all of that. And that, think about that body of water as kind of a buffer. That's going to hold them coyotes from getting down any further, of course. But up where I'm there with the south wind, you're going to call all them finger draws out, and that's going to give you on that hill a good vantage point. Looks like we got some farm fields down in there. Who knows? Maybe a little alfalfa, jackrabbits, cottontails, and it's far enough away from the busyness of the place over to the east. If this is north, I wouldn't try to call this too close to the farmhouse. Trying to call coyotes, especially during the daytime, closer to the human activity is a little tougher. And then another good spot would be down where I got that second arrow, down there in the lower right. Again, you know, if you have a straight west wind, you could sit up there. You got that whole little drainage coming down through there, and you could bring them coyotes right. You got that body of water there to kind of act as a barrier, so you know that you don't got to watch that as much. So that'd be another location you could call. Like I said, I would stay away. Try to stay away from the farm place up there on that other one. So I guess that's the main thing, and it's weird. So, you know, some people say you can't call coyotes to roads, but my deal with that is if you can get down where they can't see that road, I've had a lot of luck calling coyotes towards roads. The thing is I don't want to be so close to it that they actually see the road. Get down in there, and you know, a coyote's point of view of height-wise, if they can't see that road, I've never really had a lot of reluctance of them not coming in. So that's just another little deal there. So.
Yep. So this next slide, we're kind of looking at a scenario. So Eastern South Dakota, we're divided up in 1 mile squares. So it's a section of land. And that's what we're seeing right here. If I see something like this, coyotes love the center of that section. It's the furthest from the road. If you got a 2 mile, or better yet, a 4 mile block with no roads in it, those are natural places to be looking for a coyote. But so you got this place here, you're looking on a map and you're like, man, I see a little tree grove right in the middle there. You got a lot of edges to work with. You got looked pretty good. So you start doing some scouting. So this is what that same piece looks like from the ground level. So you got some, looks like wheat stubble. And so that's going to be roughly a half-mile away where those trees are at. So you're doing your homework, you're driving around ahead of time. You see some coyote scat on the road, good marker. That's good territorial marker. You see some fresh tracks on the side of the road or on some of the trails. So you can't call what's not there. So you know they're there. Another thing you can do is do a locator howl the night before, or just to verify what's in the area. Sometimes that's real confidence boost when you can let out a howl right at sunset and all of a sudden you got coyotes lighting up all around you. That's a great thing. You know, I probably wouldn't go out that right then and there. I'd say, come back. You know, you're in their territory. So I'm going to go back to that first, bear with me. So going back to that first setup. So now you guys kind of saw what it looked like from the ground. Where that small X is underneath that red circle, that's probably where I'm going to sneak out to quietly, try to be as unintrusive as possible, set up my collar, assuming on this one that you have a north or a west wind. I'm calling into that clump of trees. That's where I think they're going to be. And that coyote, on this particular case, let's say we have a west wind, he's going to follow that red dotted line because he's coming to the collar, but he needs to verify it's safe with its nose. So it wants to swing around downwind and smell to verify that he is, that it is a dying rabbit or that it is not danger. So what you see there with that dotted line, you're going to want to shoot him about where I ended that dotted line. Because I keep in mind, you also have your shooting lanes. I see there's, the 2 farm places, but you don't want to get them. They're going to circle downwind, but you got to get them before they get completely downwind. They catch your nose, they're gone. So once it gets close to that I call it a scent cone, because it always is dispersing and spreading out. That's when you want to stop them, and you can stop them with just a hey or a bark, or, you can go, whoo, anything to catch their attention. That'll stop that coyote, and you got about 3 seconds. So when you stop them, make sure they're standing broadside if you can. So I just want to throw this slide in there because this kind of, I wanted to, step through the different scenarios. Because when I started out, it was always hard for me to picture, okay, circle downwind, but blow the call at them. Which way's the wind? Where's the cover? And this particular spot really did a good job of that. So, go back.
Okay. Yeah. So this one here, I guess, a picture of the coyote. Calling's a lot like fishing. Some days they just won't respond, and that just happens sometimes. They don't have any interest. Nobody really knows why. But some days it's just that way. Most of the time, though, you should have some luck if you follow kind of what we've been explaining. The main thing, the only thing I'll touch on quick too, Greg, is even if you say, man, I only got today and it'll be a week before I can get out there. If the wind is not right, don't call that stand. If there's coyotes in there, don't call that without the wind being right. You're not going to get those coyotes. It's not going to happen. So the 2 type of calls would be the mouth and the electronic calls is the 2 we would be, using for calling here, of course. So the advantages, disadvantages. The advantages are they're small, they're lightweight, they fit in your pocket, simple design. Not much can go wrong with them. We have the open read and the closed read. This actually happens to be one of the very first collars I've ever bought in 1987. So I've had this one for a long time. It's an old Hadles. It's one of I call the coyote in with that. It's cracked, but yeah, so you got them 2 type of calls. And the open read calls are more freeze proof, of course, than a closed read. A closed read call, you'll get moisture built up in those and they will freeze. So most of the time you're going to be using open read calls, especially in the winter and the fall time. Is our slide, what happened to that? Their presentation. Okay. Yeah, and these do a really good job. There was a guy by the name of Bill Austin. He actually was one of the inventors of a cowl collar. And a lot of these that are made now, they're kind of copied off of his design. Of course, no batteries like an electronic collar, and they're way cheaper than electronic collar. The disadvantages is you're going to be moving around a lot more, and you can't get this sound away from you. It is wherever you're blowing it. So it's not like the electronic collar where we can put it 100 yards upwind of us and knowing where them coyotes are going to circle in and so that aspect you kind of lose with the mouth calls. They can freeze up, but it's more of the closed reed than the open. But when it's real cold, if you blow on an open reed a lot, then it's hanging on your lanyard around your neck and you don't call for a while, it can freeze up. But if you just stick it in your mouth, you'll get it to thaw out. And I guess they can be easy to lose. I've lost some, but most of your calls will come with lanyards on them. So yeah, and anymore, it used to be they were all just kind of made out of ABS plastic, things of that. Now it's kind of getting like some of your higher dollar goose and duck calls. They make them out of acrylic, and these Zepp ones, these are actually turned out on CNC machines. And they have a very good density and a very good sound to them. But of course they're quite a bit more than your standard run of the mill mouth call. But it's the mouth call industry has come a long ways.
So we all want to know, Randy, can you demo them right now? Especially the one that we're
Sure. So I guess the critter call is the one that we got for everybody. You can, they're versatile. They'll make a lot of sounds. We'll do some rabbit stuff. If you use your hands and you open and close them, you can really genuflect that sound around. The more you get out on the reed, the higher the pitch, the closer you get to the body of the call, the lower the pitch. And you can make a jackrabbit, cottontail. These calls will do a good little pump. That's like a pup in distress. They do that really well. That sound works. You can use it as a howler. They work good as a howler. Yeah, they're pretty versatile little call. They come in different sizes. This is I think called Pee-wee. This is a Magnum, and then they have this. Of course, the larger the call, the more air it's going to take. So keep that in mind. If you go hiking back in somewhere that's a half mile in, you can tuck yourself out blowing on them things. Again, it just runs the gamut. I have one made out of a cow horn, and it's a howler. That makes really good pop in distress. And it's loud because it's got a big chamber on it. But if you get into calling, you're going to end up with a pile of calls. And they're, like I said, they're kind of fun to collect too. But like I said, the Zepp ones.
So Randy, I apologize for it sounds like the technology might be, so we're getting pretty good sound out of the collar, but when it gets really loud, it seems to be muting you a little bit, but
okay.
But it sounds pretty good on this end.
Okay. So, yeah, and like I said, there's just so many different hand calls out on the market today that there's a lot to choose from. You can spend $8-9 or you can spend $70-80. Allpredatorcalls.com. That's a place I would recommend you can go to. You can spend quite a bit of time actually looking online at their catalog and all the calls they offer. The close reed ones, again, they're going to freeze a little more, but
side, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Greg, I guess you're going to tackle that one. So
Yeah. So getting into the electronic call, you know, the big advantage is you can get extremely accurate sounds. You know, they're recordings. Now, most of them are, a lot of the animals in distress are usually done by callers doing it, but it's repeatable. It's, you know, I got a Fox Pro. There's a lot on the market right now, a lot of really good ones. You can build your own. A nice thing about it is your hands are free. You can get it playing and you can set the remote down. I even, on my shooting tripod, get the camera, I even put one of these cell phone holders and a magnet on my, right here, you know, or you run a lanyard. Big advantage of being hands-free. You can get it playing. You can set up playlist. Disadvantage though is these stupid things, batteries, cold. We have a lot of cold up here. They eat the batteries. Dollars, I suppose, is probably even the bigger one. They cost a lot of money, but some of the more, there's some, you get what you want. There's some high dollar ones. There's some lower ones. They still work. Generally, the more expensive, what you're gaining is some versatility on how you program the sounds. You can download different ones or put your own in there, and volume. And that's another advantage, is you can really get some more, I think, louder volume out of electronics. You can also place the speaker away from you. So we talk about caller placement. If you're putting that speaker, the caller 100 yards away from you, off to your side, that coyote is going to be keying in on the sound. That gives you a little bit of cushion to shift around a little bit. Instead of them looking directly at you, coyotes have amazing eyes. So if you can get their attention away from you with a caller, with a decoy dog, anything to get them not looking at you. So those are some huge advantages. Now, I will say this, the other night I was out calling and working a coyote, had it hung up on a hilltop where I had no shot, and I'm working on the call and I'm using my electronic caller, and bad of me not to have the hand caller handy. My battery died at that moment. I'm trying to coax this guy in, and just out of lip squeaking range, which I was trying because I couldn't get the speaker, the amplifier battery died. And so I had to, you know, that's an occasion where sometimes timing is everything, and it's not real fast to just switch sounds. You have to, the better you know your equipment, the faster it is. But where a one mouth call you can do a lot with. So having that around your neck, even if you're running an electronic call, is a good practice, and just know your equipment. We've been talking about types of calls, and maybe we should have threw this slide in there a little faster. Let's go to the full screen, or to me. And I would happen to have dropped it. So when Randy was talking about open read, so this right here, that's the read, and that's vibrating when you're calling, and you can move in and out on this for the different sounds. Open read caller, and then you have a closed read caller. So the read is contained inside there. And Randy went over those really well. And then this one's just a little squeaker. You know, you can have some guys even tape these right to their rifle, because so without any movement, they can just hit it with their finger. I tend to like to just kind of do the little mouse squeaks with my lips, just when they're in there close. That's sometimes all it takes to get them that last little bit. But diaphragm, let's go back to the main screen again. I don't have a diaphragm call, but that would be one that goes up into your mouth, and it's really cool because it's a hand-free setup and you can have it in there. So it's the one that says Fox Pro on the lower left. It's a good option. If you have a strong gag reflex, it's less of an option for you, but keep that in mind. what's really handy is you can do a lot of sounds without moving any hands. So.
5 minutes to 8:30. So I don't know how many more slides we have.
So, you know, kind of went over the open, and we already covered the advantages, disadvantages. Let's just keep going here. Oop. I'm sorry, we got two. I got a remote that's kind of working, and so Sandy's helping me out. So sometimes we double hit. So, Randy, back to you.
Yeah, so basically 2 types of calling sounds is what we're using. Animal in distress. Again, we're preying on that hunger issue with those coyotes, with those bobcats. And then coyote vocalizations, social territorial behavior. Coyotes, they're very vocal animals, and they use that for a lot of different things. They can use it to bring the family group together to hunt in deep snow. And they can use it to see if anybody is still in an area. Good coyote habitat will always have coyotes. And one way they know if that habitat's open for them to move in is by howling at night. And if they're used to getting a response and they go 2-3 times and they don't get no response, then they'll move down in there and try to take over that area. In the spring and summer, when they're mating and then having their pups, they get very territorial on their dens. So howling is a good way for the male to keep other intruders from coming into their home range as well. So them are the 2 things we're really relying on when we're calling on them. The animal distresses, cottontail rabbit, jackrabbit, woodpecker, rodent squills, fawn bleats, they're all good. You know, if I would say one thing again, due to calling pressure, the rabbits are probably used and abused. I'm not saying you still can't call coyotes in with them, but you know, if you can use the woodpeckers or the rodent squeaks, especially if you know you're in close, start out soft and then go up in volume. Fawn bleats work great, timing of the year, and even in the wintertime, you can still bring them in with that as well. That would be your main sounds. But on electronic caller, it's really the gambit. You can buy so many different distress sounds. But pretty much with a handheld caller, you can make about any of those sounds on there. So again, you stay down lower on the reed, and that's going to be more like a fawn in distress. You come out on it. It's going to be more of a rabbit, or, you know, high. So you know that's where we are with those 2. As far as the different sounds go, do we have that back up there? Yeah, and then we go on. We can go on to the next one. So then we're going to go into the coyote vocalizations, and you know, the lone howl is something, you know, a coyote will do. All he's trying to do is see who else is out there. Probably not going to go down. Challenge howl is kind of being used for reasons. That's a good one to use later on in the winter. It's kind of stay out of my area. And it's got some barky and then short howls in there. The distress sounds, they're always good. That's, you know, like a and in the morning, I did. You know that something's not right. You'll hear that a lot as you call coyote. That's fun to have. And that's just where they just kind of do that barky howl. And if you hear that a lot of times it changes up, you're probably not going to get to the company, especially if you're within eyesight of you. But vocalizations are very important. And, you know, I'd like to mix those in with distress sounds, especially in the wintertime. And they both have their place. But yeah, mix them in. And also, I like to mix in mouth calls with electronic calls too. So if I'm doing a howl, On the electronic call, I can mix in some distress sounds. That kind of helps out as well. Just change the pace, something different. So, let's see. Okay, Greg, I think you're kind of up there on that one there.
Yeah, so about 10 more minutes left of this presentation, just kind of giving everyone's a heads up there. We talked a lot about shooting already, so I'm not going to go into the calibers anymore. We kind of covered a lot of this. The biggest takeaway is know your equipment. Do that animal justice. Make sure you're shooting the appropriate piece of equipment, firearm, for what you need to do. Tactics, we've talked a lot about this, but I do want to cover some shooting rests. Why don't you flip back over to me here? So this is just a shooting tripod. You don't need this, but I thought for this presentation, it's easier. You know, days of freehanding coyotes, there's no need for it. There's so many things on the market. Bipods are great. They're a little limited on movement, but man, you're steady. You know, practice your shooting positions. If you're going to be taking a knee, working a sling, find something to rest on, because part of the excitement of calling in a coyote is everyone gets excited and gets the shakes, and the more you can stabilize your firearm, the better it's going to be. So flip it back. So know your equipment, know your range, your ballistics and all that. And we kind of talked about optics and suppressors. This is a similar picture or the same location that Randy talked about earlier. And in this picture, this is one of our old coworkers. Him and I were out calling coyotes here. This is a great example. I wanted to just talk about it. And the reason it was in here was talking about shooting rests. Great place for a bipod, but also it's also a great place to have a partner covering the backside because he cannot see what's behind him there. All right, back up one. So,
okay, now we'll get into the ballistics for coyotes. And this is kind of something that I've really spent time in through the years. You know, coyotes are not varmints, even though people like to say that. To me, a varmint is a groundhog or a prairie dog or something like that. So a lot of those bullets that they say are for varmints, they mean small little critters. To me, a coyote is a 25 to 40 pound animal that has some solid mass. So bullet construction is very critical, especially for fur. And I don't like really thin jacketed bullets at high velocities. If you hit bone, a lot of bad things can happen. So when I say velocity versus bullet weight, the larger the bullet, the more offerings you have for a little more thicker jacketed bullet. And to me, I put coyotes in there with a like a small deer as far as body mass goes. So, you know, ballistic tips, varmint ones versus the medium game one. I would pick the medium game one, especially if you're not having a dedicated rifle. If you want to use a 243, a 6 Creedmoor, 6.5 Creedmoor, I would tend to use a bullet that has a better jacket, a thicker jacket, and doesn't open up as violently as say a hollow point. Because again, if you hit bone, it's going to be messy. Know your ballistics, and you have various scope reticle choices now on the market. Scope turrets are another thing. We'll get into that here in a little bit. Magnification versus field of view. So if you're hunting more thicker cover, you're probably not going to want a 5x25 powered scope. You're going to want something with a wider field of view. So you're going to be down in that 3 to 7 range. But if you're going to shoot further out, then you want more magnification on your scope. So that's something to weigh too, is where you're going to do the majority of your call. So again, here's kind of what I'm talking about. On the left, you can see that's an offering by Hornady. That's what would be their A-tip or their ELD match bullet. You can see the copper jacket is the same thickness from top to bottom of the bullet. Now, in a larger bullet, you could get by with that, and that would do really well on coyotes. In the middle is more of a more expansive type. You see the big hollow cavity in the tip. Again, you're back to that same concentric jacket on the bullet. The thickness doesn't change. 22 250s, a lot of them with the added speed, they will go in, blow up, and you don't get a lot of exit holes. That's good, as long as you're not hitting bone. And then on the far right, that is a Nosler ballistic tip, but that one's made more for deer. And you can see how that jacket, as you go down the bullet, the copper gets thicker. And as you get to the base, it really thickens up. So if you got a 243 or a 25-06, I would lean more towards that for coyotes than something that's going to be really explosive, especially if you would hit bone, because it's going to frangiate, it's going to blow apart a lot. And that's going to make a lot more mess in the coyote. Yeah, like I said, just match them up. Shotgun shells, and again, me hunting in Missouri and Iowa, that's something that I spent some time on. So as you can see, we have the dead coyote loads there. To me, they've just gotten crazy priced. I don't recommend them anymore. They're like $6 or $7 a shell now because they're made out of tungsten. The Hornady Heavy Magnum coyote loads, I've used them quite a bit. They're very good. They're nickel instead of copper plated. Nickel is actually harder than copper, so you don't get near the pellet deformation. And at 35 yards with a modified choke tube, them things will blow a hole right through a coyote. I mean, you get good penetration, and they work really well. So again, just match your shotgun with your choke. Shoot them a few times before you take them out. But a shotgun is a very capable tool for calling coyotes.
Say, Randy, just jumping in here. We're getting closer to end on time here, and it looks like we got 20 questions sitting in there. So if you want to skim through the rest of them, or maybe we can just hold off on the fur quality for another presentation.
Okay.
Because I think we really want to get into the questions here.
Okay.
So.
Perfect. I will just go through the questions in order here. So first question is there a program where the Game Fish and Parks can connect hunters to landowners? They're seeking coyote hunting land but need a place to start.
We have had a few programs in the past. They were really tough to get any traction. We've tried different things with big game hunters, and at the present time, no. The best bet is to contact some of the local conservation officers or the local offices, the local wildlife damage specialists, and see if there's any places they would recommend. But no, I don't believe any of our formal programs are going on. There might be some mentor programs, I think, out there to connect up youth with experienced hunters. I forget what it's called. But the short answer is no, we don't have anything right now.
The best thing would be is to contact your local conservation officer.
Yeah. Perfect. Is there a limit to how many coyotes I can harvest?
No.
No.
Easy one.
Yep. No.
Perfect. We'll move on here. What can I hunt with a hunting license versus a fur bearer? And can I sell my furs if I only have a hunting license?
You can hunt coyotes, fox, badger, coons with a hunting license, and you can sell the fur with that. But if you're going to do any trapping or bobcat, is that right, Greg? On the bobcat, do they need a fur harvesters on that?
I do not. I don't know. I'd have to check on the hunting of a bobcat. I don't know the requirements on that off the top of my head.
Okay. Yeah, that would be one. And the other thing with bobcats, to let them know too, they must be tagged with a CITES tag before you try to sell them. No fur buyer will touch those without having a CITES tag.
You know, and this is a great example of, there's a lot of rules out there. We deal with this stuff daily. We're not Randy and I are not law enforcement. So we're, you know, admittedly not the most versed on it, but I will pull out the Hunting Game and Fish app and pull the license requirements up myself a lot, or a hunting handbook. ask the questions first. Before you go out, if you got these questions, get them figured out. It's usually just a phone call away, or flip through the pages that are of the book or the app. So just keep that in mind.
Perfect. All right. So for coyote hunting, how long do you usually run an electronic caller? Do you wait in between calls? How do I know what volume setting to use?
Randy, you want to take a stab at that one?
Sure. So again, the cadence of it, I mean, it can run the gambit. You can play it for a minute and a half and not do anything for 5. Some guys let it run the whole 15, 20 minutes. That's really, I mean, really more what you think what you have confidence in. But I would recommend start out with low volume and then work your way up as you get into the stand. So if you call for a little bit on lower volume, you look around for 2-3 minutes, and you want to try another sound, increase your volume up a little bit more, and see what happens there. Now, one thing with coyote vocalizations, doesn't matter where I'm at in the calling sequence, coyotes don't really regulate their sound. When they howl, it's at what volume they can do it. So I always play them up on the upper end of the volume.
Good question.
Perfect. I did want to clarify that bobcats do require a fur bearer's license upon further review in the hunting handbook there.
Okay, yep.
When we're calling coyotes, on average, how far will they come into a call? Mile, 2 miles, 5 miles, a quarter mile? How far will they come?
Boy, there's a lot of variables in that question. And, the number one variable is they have to be able to hear you. So if you're blowing into the wind and it's windy out, it's going to be less. If it's crisp, cold, calm, it's going to be more. So that's the cop-out answer. I would expect to reach out. I wouldn't want to be any further away than a half mile away. Not say you won't pull them in from further, but I want to, if I'm there and I know where the good cover is, I want to be able to be assured that they can hear me. So, but that kind of plays into then your next stand. How far away do you go? It's not going to hurt anything if you just, if you can move out of sight and then reposition. So I guess you're just going to have to kind of play with the wind and the air density with the cold. But I'd say, kind of aim for that half mile range.
And one thing I would add is the lower the wind speed, the better results you'll have. 0 to 15 is kind of a good average. But I've hunted in coyote calling contests where the day of the contest it blew 45, and you had no choice but to go call coyotes. But your success rate as it gets more windy is just less. They're not as confident coming in when it's super windy either.
Perfect. All right. The next question: can I use my bow to hunt raccoons?
Yes, I believe you can, but I'm not positive. Is that a good answer?
I believe the answer is yes as well.
Yeah.
Do I need to take a management approach to my predator hunting? Are there consequences to taking too many predators off my property?
I don't think there is a consequence. So when we're talking raccoons, I don't think we can physically get to a dangerous level, if that's where, a population critical level on your property. A lot of trappers sometimes will leave a few, but the density if you're on good cover, Randy said this earlier, if you take the coyotes out of there, new coyotes will find it because it is good cover. So, the species we're talking about, no, you don't have to worry about it.
There's plenty of studies out there that say to really knock down a coyote population, you'd have to take 70% plus of that population for almost a decade before you'd really see a drastic drop in the coyote population in a given area. It's just amazing how quick they do fill in. I mean, you can go into an area that's really good, knock a bunch of coyotes out of there and come back 3.5 months later and there'll be more coyotes.
Very adaptable.
Perfect. As we continue with questions, I'm going to put that survey in the chat for everyone. As we're doing questions, feel free to fill out that survey. That's just going to help us know who is here and get a read for the class. So I just dropped that back in chat. But keeping going with the questions here, is it better for me to sit on the ground level with concealment or in a ground blind, or should I be in a tree stand?
Tree stands aren't typically a coyote hunting spot. Traditionally, I'm not saying it won't work, but tower blinds are a great spot. But a tree stand is very visible. I guess I would take everything in consideration. If it's a good spot, I wouldn't be afraid to do it. But if you can conceal yourself better, I'll take the ground if it means them seeing me. But I've shot a coyote out of a tree stand. I was deer hunting, but you can do it. You know, look at what you got for cover. What's going to work best for you?
Perfect. Can I hunt public land at night?
I believe the answer is no. I'm not positive on that. You know, take it back. I don't believe you can with night vision, but you may be able to with natural light and shotgun or rim fire. But that's another one. I'm spitballing. Don't quote me on it. We're going to have to go to the law book on that one. A lot with the night hunting has changed in the last couple of years. And so this is one of those areas that you really need to make sure you're doing everything right.
I'd visit with a CO, your local CO.
Yep.
Perfect. Are there any different strategies I need to use to call in a coyote who seems very educated? Seems to know what I'm going for.
Yeah, again, you know, if you're hunting high pressured coyotes in areas that have a lot of calling pressure, or even if you've been in there and you've kind of messed up on them, you know, like I said, the rabbit in distress sound is the most used and abused sound there is. I would recommend use something off the wall. You know, I've used some different rodent sounds, like a vole, things like that on electronic caller that, you know, most people don't generally use. But it's going to take maybe change. Maybe if most people call that area in the morning, call it in the afternoon instead of a morning stand, and vary that approach. But again, make sure you have the wind right, and call from, and by then that'll force you to try from a different area too. If everybody goes into that textbook spot and calls it from the same spot every time, well, them coyotes, they can get to advantage where they can say, oh, I don't see nothing there, and they'll just back on out of there. But, and again, plan to spend more time there. I mean, you know, I've heard a guy sitting for an hour and 45 minutes before the coyote. So, I mean, it just, is that coyote that mean that much to you, or are you better off going to new areas and leaving them kind of for seed? That's, I guess, up to you.
One question we've got here, you said to contact my local conservation officer. How do I get a hold of my local conservation officer? Is that different from my Game Fish and Parks office number? How do I go about doing that?
All right, Sandy, help me out here. So here's our hunting handbook, the very back of it. All right, so if you start looking, we got conservation officers, and then we have wildlife damage management specialists on there. So all kinds of contact persons.
With that in mind too, folks, keep in mind, if you call a Game Fish and Parks office, we can connect you directly to your officer or your damage specialist. So if all you have access to is the GFP office in your area, start there and we'll get you where you need to be.
Perfect. Are there any magazine capacity limits for hunting coyotes?
No, there's not.
All right, so someone here, a long time ago, they were hunting and they had their farm dog and 2 coyotes came in. Is it against the law to hunt with your dog? Is your dog considered bait in any way there?
Nope. Actually, a lot of our guys out west, they actually have decoy dogs. So yeah, no, dogs are perfectly fine. I would just caution against looking at buying one unless you're going to really use it a lot, because them dogs really need to be worked. But yeah, no, that's fine. There's no restrictions about dogs whatsoever. So you can have your dog along.
Perfect. Have any of you heard of experiences or experienced yourself using cell phone apps with calls like iHunt 750 and then using a Bluetooth speaker as opposed to an e-collar?
I've looked into some of that because I'm number one cheapo. So I don't want, for my own stuff, equipment, I don't want to spend any more than I have to. And you get good sounds. There's a lot of sounds out there, a lot of free sounds. What you're going to really struggle with is volume. These, like the Fox Pro, it's a horn speaker. It really projects that sound out further than a lot of these Bluetooth speakers. So, and then some durability issues. You know, this equipment gets beat around quite a bit, muddy, wet, cold. So, but you can do it. Especially now, I take it back. I will step back and say for raccoon, I know a guy when I work with him, and he called. He was walking by a property that he just bought. Hadn't done anything with their old building on it. He pulls out his cell phone because he saw all the scratches going up the side of the building to a hole. And he went onto YouTube, typed in raccoon sounds and hit play. No speaker, no nothing, just off of his phone. And it was quiet enough. And he got a raccoon to come out with that. So get creative.
Raccoons are just curious.
Yes, they are.
Perfect. If I'm just coming in, I walk into my spot just before daylight and I wait a few minutes until legal shooting light. What should I start with? What call should I be starting with? A female invitational howl, or what vocal call do you recommend to start with early in the morning?
Yeah, again, if something, I don't like to use a really old gruff male coyote howl because again, you don't know the age structure of those coyotes. If they're young of the year coyotes, really rough, gruff coyote interrogation howls and deeper howls, they can repel as many coyotes as you'll call in with that stuff. So yeah, a female invitation or a pup howl, something like that, that's not near as territorial. Start with that and see if you get anything coming in, or a lot of times they'll howl back to you, or go into your distress sounds after that. But the real deep male howls, they're more of a tool for the spring and summer. So I don't use them a lot because it's still in the fall and in the winter, you still got a lot of those young of the year pups that were born last spring, and they're not looking to get in a fight and getting their butt kicked by some old mean male coyote. So keep it on the more high pitched howl sound.
Perfect. Does my 204 caliber work for coyote hunting?
I would say,
go ahead, Greg.
Well, 204 is a fairly new caliber. Yes, it's good caliber. It's one on the smaller end. So know your ranges, know your limitations, but perfectly legal. And it's a good zippy little round.
Along the same lines, 300 blackout for coyote also work?
They will all work and they are all legal. If you want to try using a BB gun on a coyote, we don't have any caliber restrictions. 300 blackout, great little round, especially suppressed, but it's got a pretty heavy trajectory arc, so know your ballistics on what you're using.
Can I carry a rifle and a shotgun with me at the same time?
Yes. Yep, we don't have any restrictions there.
And can I use spotlights for coyotes or raccoons?
You can.
I'm kind of waiting for Randy to get, because these nighttime ones are so difficult because
I think you got to be with the landowner in order to do that. He has to physically be with you with the spotlight situation.
I believe it reads landowner and accompanying guests on their own land can use a spotlight for predators, varmints.
Yeah.
I'm checking right now. Yes, that's true. Page 39, folks, is general rules for artificial light. So 39 in your hunting handbook will answer that as well. Is it common for a raccoon to tackle a decoy?
No, it's not common, but it happens. You don't go out there expecting it to happen, but you get one that just comes a hard charge, and it can happen. It's common enough that people know it happens, but it's still pretty special if you get one to do it.
Are wild dogs considered coyotes?
No, wild dogs are still domestics. They're totally different genes, totally different animal.
Perfect. I can answer this question. Someone asked where we got the beaver on the wall. That's one of our educational animals at the outdoor campus in Sioux Falls. So
There you go.
all of those animals on the back were donated to us, and we use those for educational purposes. So take a class at the outdoor campus in the coming months, and maybe that beaver will make a feature in your class. Last question here. How does a person get a job doing this kind of stuff?
Oh, man. That's, well, I can tell you how I got my job. Maybe Randy can pipe up too, but there's a lot of interest in our jobs. So, you know, you're not going to be competitive unless you have a 4-year degree in a biology related field. I went up to SDSU, got a degree in wildlife management, and to get competitive, you're going to need some experience, a very can-do attitude, and be willing to deal with a lot of stinky, buggy, dirty, awesome, fun, dangerous time, all kinds of that stuff. So, and then the proper answer is experience, education, go through the state website, find the job postings, and reach out there. We have internships, are a great way in the summer for gaining that experience. We hire a lot of people, a lot of college students that are up and coming future biologists and conservation officers and wildlife damage specialists, getting their experience that way.
And I started trapping in '79, kind of showing my age, I guess. And I started calling coyotes in '87, '88. And then I helped a guy that actually has been on for a long time with us. And I did a lot of his beaver work when he got overloaded. And I just did that out of my own time with my own gas. So, and got hired on.
And I'm probably my
All
own,
right,
I got to throw in there the little, I'm more of a non-traditional trapper. I started off doing research, and my first trapping experience was trapping mice, and moving on to trapping turkeys and pheasants and grouse and doves and all, not what you'd consider traditional, but a lot of that stuff that I learned by doing that applied to this job. And so, you know, you don't have to grow up hunting and trapping and calling, and, you know, you can tailor a lot of your experiences to be good at what you do.
All right, we got 2 more questions that I missed. Quickly, do fur buyers take unskinned coyotes, and how do I find a fur buyer?
Yes, they will take them. That's called on the carcass. Just know you're going to get less money. The more work you do, the less they have to hire that out, the more money you'll get for the fur typically. Finding a fur buyer, boy, that's getting tougher and tougher anymore. South Dakota Trappers Association could help out. And Grenwald Fur, they do have an online thing, and they do make stops in South Dakota, Nebraska, and Iowa. So I would check them out. They're one of the largest route buyers really left in the country.
All right. Do the same techniques work for fox as coyote?
So, hold on one second, Nolan. We're gonna hold that question here. We're gonna stop the recording here.
We're going to stop the recording here. We want to thank everybody who's been here. I know we're starting to lose them. I know bedtime's coming up, and I know we are also about a half hour over what we thought we were going to be, but you guys have done a great job of giving us good questions. Randy and Greg want to keep answering your questions, but I'm going to stop the recording, and you can keep putting those in for a little bit longer. And don't forget to fill out that survey of no limbs as well. Thank you.
About how much longer do you want to continue?
How much longer do you want to stay?
Is it, how big is the blizzard out there?
I've got 3 more questions. And so if you submit your question after now, we'll just say you won't get it answered. We got 3 more and we'll be done here.